This is part 13 of Federalist number 10. We had started on paragraph 1, and I will continue. The valuable improvement made by American constitutions on the popular models, both ancient and modern, cannot certainly be too much admired. But it would be an unwarrantable partiality to contend that they have as effectually obviated the danger on this side as was wished and expected. Did you catch that? It said American constitutions. So he's referring to the constitutions that were written as soon as America declared independence. The states were asked to write new constitutions for the state. 11 of them did. 2 of them kept their old constitution, their old charter. And which actually Connecticut was one of them, and they had the first written constitution in the United States. It was called Connecticut. I'm drawing a blank right now, but I'll come back to it. Anyways, 2 states did not need to write or decided not to write new constitutions, but 11 did. So he says, even though we have 11 great new constitutions, we know that at times they've had problems. And he's mentioned it, that part of what we're doing is actually looking at the problems of these states, the constitutions, and we're learning from that and have learned actually from that and have made this new constitution for you, which is hopefully going to be trouble-free. It's not going to create the same troubles and problems that the 11 constitutions, the other states, the constitutions of the 13 states have made. Complaints are everywhere heard from our most considerate and virtuous citizens, equally the friends of public and private faith, and of public and personal liberty, that our governments are too unstable, that the public good is disregarded in the conflict of rival parties, and that measures are too often decided not according to the rules of justice and the rights of minor party, but by the superior force of an interested and overbearing majority. It says a lot of our considerate, well-meaning, virtuous citizens are telling us we got problems that we need to fix. They're looking at the different states and they're saying that rights of minorities is being violated. Now remember, when he says public faith, private faith, and public and personal liberty, he's talking about partly because of partly the laws that were being passed in states that I mentioned to you about, that would work to the advantage of the debtors. They would not, they would grant the debtors stay laws, which would give them extra chance, extra time to pay their debts. And this would be to the disadvantage of, we know, the creditors. And all sorts of contracts were being broken because sometimes the majority in a state would force the assembly to write laws that would violate the rights of minority. So when he says private faith and public and personal liberty, you got to look at both sides. And one side, he's saying that we have to make sure that the creditors get their money back, that the debtors just don't keep on going without paying back. And at the same time, he's reminding us that a majority could violate the personal liberty of minority. Let's say you're in a state, okay? Let's say you're in one of these northeastern states up here, where a lot of congregational Christians live, okay? And let's say you are a Baptist. It was a sect that was just actually getting more and more people joining it. And they were actually treated badly in some of the states, if not most of the states. And Madison here says, if you're living in a state where majority of people are not of the same religion that you are, they might violate your personal liberty. They might take away or make it hard for you to follow and practice your religion. So when he says violation of personal liberty, he's talking about that. On one side, he is on the side of the creditors. On the other side, he's on the side of the minority who might happen to be of the religion that is not liked by the majority. So he says all these constitutions in different states have these problems. And all our virtuous, considerate citizens are telling us that. That's why we wrote this Constitution, to help with some of these problems, help alleviate some of these problems. Then he continues, however anxiously we may wish that these complaints had no foundation, the evidence of known facts will not permit us to deny that they are in some degree true. Even though some people say there's no foundations for this might be a lie, this might be somebody's exaggerating, but he says when you look at it, most of them are true. But it will be found at the same time that other causes will not alone account for many of our heaviest misfortunes, and particularly for that prevailing and increasing distrust of public engagements and alarm for private rights, which are echoed from one end of the continent to the other. These must be chiefly, if not wholly, effects of unsteadiness and injustice with which a factious spirit has tainted our public administration. See, he finishes the paragraph, a long paragraph, with the word faction and factious. He says, we are experiencing all these difficulties because these factions have tainted, have darkened, have put a dark spot on our experiences with free government in all the states. And when he says that they are echoed from one end of the continent to the other, he's basically saying that in all 13 states, from one end to the other, they're experiencing these problems in those states, that majority factions violate some sort of right. It's either property right or personal liberties. So he says we've got to do something about it. We've got to be truthful to ourselves and make sure that contracts are not violated. If they are, we have to find a solution for them. Now remember, we will talk about this more. When he says contracts are not violated, in all fairness, he's not just thinking about the money that comes in his pocket or the money that comes into the rich people's pocket back then. I've already mentioned the book Unruly Americans that I think you should read. He kind of looks at what was going on in the background. But the fact, the matter is that they were just starting to build this nation, and they wanted to be known not as people or a nation that had bad credit, that would not pay back its debts. So in one way, he's being selfish with his own view of things and with the other rich people, founders' view of things. In other ways, he's trying to see way ahead of time, to think of the nation's credit, because he knows that this nation is going to develop and it needs to be able to borrow money from others, from other countries, and just generally have good credit, whether it's with foreigners or with the people inside the country. So think about that. Okay, we'll come back and continue.